Aloha, everybody. Michelle Melendez with Blossom Inner Wellness and StandTogetherHawaii.com. And I have an amazing guest today. If you guys are wanting to understand how we've been enslaved with our money, how we can get out of it, this is the guy to go to. John J. Singleton. He's from Ace of Coins, 30-year expert on financial risk and property rights, and an entrepreneur. And this guy has a plethora of information on the financial system. So, John, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Michelle.
So, my first question, I've been teaching people a lot about how we've been enslaved, and the money system is really a huge way that we have been enslaved. Can you kind of share with people the money system, what it is, and where we're at right now?
I'll give you an analogy. I think this is the best way that I've learned to understand it. So if I talk about the slave days before the emancipation in the 1800s, okay, the slaves were working the land, the plantation, right? They were working for free. They weren't getting a salary. They didn't have really any rights, but they were cared for. There was a cost to keep them. There was a health care cost, right? Sheltering, clothing, this sort of thing. So there was a cost. And so after the slave system kind of ended, uh, there was still that cost. So what happened was the plantation owner simply paid that cost to the slave. So now he's not a slave anymore, technically, and he's making enough money to keep on showing up for work the next week to make more money so we can keep on showing up for work the next week, which sounds a lot like we have today. So the
Mm-hmm.
Federal Reserve notes that are into circulation, they come into circulation in a manner in which that exploits people. So the way that works is it's whenever consumers want money or credit or loans, they go to the bank and the bank issues credit. The money didn't exist right before the application for the loan or
Correct.
credit. And so from that moment on, you're working to return that money. And so what's happening is the value of your labor is being taken out of the economy. And when ultimately the end user, that last person that pays a tax on the money that he got from like 2,700 other transactions that came after you borrowed the money, when he pays it, it disappears off the books and they start over. So it's just another way to obtain your labor for free. It's the same system. It's just that now it's not just black people, it's everybody that's in that system. Now it comes with there's always a balance, as you know, there's always a counter
Mm-hmm.
energy, right? So
Yeah.
here's the counter. If you understand what's going on, for example, if you understand that your house is not your asset, it's somebody's, it's the banks, it's the lien holders, it's the state, the property tax people, it's their asset, it's not yours. You are working for that house. But if you bought your neighbor's house and leased it out to them for a net profit, let's say $100 a month, your net is $100 a month. Maybe you're leasing it to them for 2,000 a month. I don't know. But that becomes your asset now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So our system is set up so that it serves the rich people or rich people ideas. So that looks like this. If I have if I need to buy a house or rent, it doesn't matter. I still have a liability I have to pay for. There's no way of escaping unless I live outside and I still kind of have a liability, right? So let's say I have a house and some way I got to pay rent or mortgage. What I need to do is use credit to go buy an asset that offsets my liability. That is our remedy. We need to stop complaining about this system that's taking advantage of us because it's not. This is the knowledge that's not being used. You're abandoning your property rights, as I say, by not going out and actually increasing your net worth. You should have the mindset that within 3 to 6 months in the beginning of the year, by June, you should have earned enough money to pay your bills for the entire year. If that were your practice, you're not going to complain so much, are you, anymore? You're going to
No.
appreciate. I mean, we live in a feudal system. I don't know how else. That means we have no property rights. I don't know how else we can live, but it's just the way it is, okay? We understand we do not have property rights unless we claim them. And even then, it's very difficult to enforce the property rights. So it's a big subject, as you can tell.
It's huge. It's actually it's what keeps people working and like you said, kind of on the treadmill. So your business, how did you first learn this? Like what came up? You're an entrepreneur, financial expert. when did you start looking, going, whoa, this is not right for
Well,
humanity?
when I was an entrepreneur since I was about 12 years old, and in school I did crazy things to make money. I even did people's homework, and I was not a good student, but I still, I made a few bucks doing that. It was crazy. But anyways, I started looking into this when I quit my job at IBM because the job I had, I knew that they paid too much, and I knew it was a fake job, so I quit after a couple of years. And I got into this type of service where I provide a professional service to people, much like you would as a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a bar member. And I got into it, ironically, out of from a person that I know, a friend of mine that introduced me to the tax code back in the early 90s. And he said, "Hey, this is crazy. It's illegal. They're, enslaving us." And I was like, "What? I never heard of that before." So I thought, why argue with the guy? I don't know. Apparently he's been studying it. Maybe I should go learn. So I went to the USF library here well, it was in Tampa. I live in Orlando now. I went to the Tampa USF library and I asked for the legal section, the reference section, and the librarian showed me. And I said, "Where's the tax code?" And I thought it would be a book. It was like 50. She goes, "It's
50
right
books?
there."
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
the
it's
whole
huge.
shelf. Right. It's actually 2 volumes. It's volumes 26 and 27. And that's just the statutes. She didn't even show me, and I didn't learn till like a couple of years later that there were regulations that go along with those. There's like 120 of those for each volume. So, so my first thought was, okay, and I was not a law person. I didn't study law at all. I was a geek in math and science and computer programming, but so I had like a technical background, this logical thinking type of thing. And so my first thought was, if there's that many books that need to establish that I'm a taxpayer or have to pay a federal income tax, then probably I don't. That was that was my
That's truly so
that was my
confusing.
uneducated, right.
Is.
If it
Oh,
takes that
you
much
mean the logic?
words, right, then we're lying. We're lying. So I started reading it, and sure enough, I had a job after IBM. I had another job that was it was a full-time job, but it was a part-time period. And so I spent like 80 hours of my week studying the law in the mid 90s, the early 90s. And I would sit at the law library and I would follow the tax code and I would literally follow where it would say, according to section such and such. And I'd go pull that section. And so I'd have like 8 books of the tax code on my desk with case law that's being referred to using the annotation. And I would track down everything and I would have to make a note on my notepad. This is before the computers had everything, online. And
Mhm.
I literally I found everything. I went and tracked it all. And I said, okay, so the whole tax code is based on this. Wages are those the money that's paid for compensation to our congressmen, or it's money earned if you're operating an oil rig or manufacturing
Yeah,
pistols or
they're really
revolvers.
specific.
Yeah,
They're specific
yeah,
on a certain thing, like the District of Columbia. If you work for
yeah.
the District of Columbia, if you're in this radius, but
If
then
you're in
they
that
make people
jurisdiction, yeah,
think, yeah, the district
yeah,
jurisdiction, and they make people think it's everybody when it's
yeah.
just a
So
smaller number of people.
let's go back to the quick history. The quick history is the banking system it's a franchise, like kind of like a Chinese restaurant. It's not really a franchise, but it's a copy and it works. It's a good business model. So the Federal Reserve System is a copy of the Bank of England. So to make it work in the 1800s, or I think they brought in the Civil War just to try to get the banking system to, with that, you cannot have the Bank of England copy without a tax system. And our Constitution wouldn't allow the tax system the way it was in England. So they couldn't get around it, right? So they they kept on trying, the bankers, and
Yeah.
it kept getting thrown out. Okay, so they had to get rid of the money opposition to the formation of the Federal Reserve. So there's lots of rich people out there knowing what was going on, knowing that the Fed was trying to be formed. They're trying to form the central banking authority,
Yes.
and these rich people are like, we don't need that much control, and the other people are like, oh yeah, we do. So there's this like
Yeah.
fighting amongst all the rich people. So some of the rich people got together and said, "Hey, let's go find this ship over here that's in England in Liverpool. Let's rechristen it, called the Titanic. Let's brand it and sell it and get these rich people, get everybody on there. And at the last minute, let's get all the evil rich people off of there and let's sink that thing and kill all the rich people," which they kind of did, right? So they got rid of the
Y-
opposition in Congress.
That's right. I just want to pop in there because for those of you who are watching who are going, what is he talking about? That was our first false flag, you guys, was the Titanic. There were the men who died on the Titanic would not have allowed the federal government, the Federal Reserve to have been created. And so the Federal
Right.
Reserve is not part of the government. It is a privately owned foreign bankers that
Yeah.
own the Federal Reserve, you guys. So I love this, John. I got chills all over. So keep
Well,
going.
you can't have that system unless you're able to create money out of nothing and then take it back. And what better way to take it back than make people work for it so they have to pay. They're taxed out. They're taxed. They're taxed. So here's the thing. So they brought this in 1913. Wilson signed it in 1912, 1913. Right about the sinking of the Titanic. Go look it up. 1913. So 1916,
Mhm.
1916, someone challenged the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment was this thing about, if you talk to any tax attorney, he's going to tell you that the authority to tax was the 16th Amendment. And he's completely wrong. There is the authority to tax. It's unquestioned. Article 1, Section 8, U.S. Constitution. The 16th Amendment was just for marketing. It did not change the Constitution. And there was a case that went up to the Supreme Court, Stanton versus Baltic Mining Company, 1916. That's the citation of it. And in that case, the holding was that the 16th Amendment only reestablished the powers it already had to collect taxes. So from
Mhm.
there, what happened was people thought that they were required to pay a tax because they did something that created a tax liability. But instead, what they did was trick people into creating the tax liability themselves, and that's how they survived the legal scrutiny afterwards. After they tried like 8 times, and they finally figured it out. Let's make people think there's a tax and make them volunteer and make them sign something
Yeah.
under penalty of perjury, which creates the obligation, and then they can't argue with it after that because they did it voluntarily. That's our system right now. Just
Yes,
like,
yes.
yeah.
And wasn't it like it's reason W4, W9, whatever it is, W stands for war, wasn't that that's what I was told that's the reason for the W
That's
on
interesting.
the tax forms.
There's probably some sort of nomenclature understanding with all these forms like 1040. What's that all about? W4.
Exactly.
Who comes up with that stuff? Like
Yeah.
1099. I don't know. It's a programming. It's a way to program it.
Yes.
Also the language of the tax code itself, it makes the tax practitioner feel like he understands something if he knows all these provisions and can cite all the law, because then it makes him feel competent. But let me tell you something that you probably never heard this anywhere before. If you remove the entire tax code, Title 26, it would not defeat the government's ability to continue doing what it's doing right now, collecting income taxes. They don't need Title 26. It's just a way to obfuscate what they're doing.
Wow. Wow. So you have remedy for this. Let's talk a little bit about what can people do? Because a lot of people go, I've shared some information about the tax system and they go, Michelle, people go to jail if they stop paying
Yeah.
taxes. And
Well, let's pay the taxes. I pay. I only pay when I owe. I go out of my way to not owe. I just reorganize the way I handle property and property rights. So let me give an example. Let's say about this. Oh, I got to talk about cryptos. You got to talk about cryptographic
yeah, yeah,
currency.
I saw you
All
guys
right.
ace of
So,
coins.
all
It's in
right.
the description.
So the IRS comes out in 2014 and says, we're going to define cryptographic currency, virtual currency, as property. All right. Then they went forward from there and tried to intimidate people and scare people into doing something that they don't need to do any of this stuff. All the software being used to do all the 1099 at Coinbase, to do all your accounting and account for the trades between coins to determine your cost basis and tax liability, it's all a fraud. None of that's accurate. There's a simple algebraic equation you can use to determine your cost basis, but let me give an example of how to completely avoid it legally. Forget all the nonsense and the drama. Here's what you do. You open an account at one of the exchanges using a limited liability company. Okay. And the way you do it is, like, here's a hypothetical example because there's probably a half dozen ways I can do this. So let's say I can't do this with my wife because it's one person. So I can have my brother or my adult child do this. So he and I sign on to the LLC as owners, own member managers. Okay. We open the account at Coinbase. We give up all our KYC, no problem. Give up our driver's license, all that nonsense. SSN, no problem. We get a tax number for the LLC. So what's happened is I have property rights and obligations. I might have a duty to file a tax return. Who knows? My other partner, my son or my business partner, he might have the same thing. Heck, he might be in bankruptcy. I don't know. The thing is, we both combine our property rights under the LLC. So now we are a unique person that's never existed before that has no tax liability. We don't have a liability to anybody. Nobody can sue us for anything under the umbrella of the LLC. They can sue us.
Wow.
It would never
Yeah.
survive. Yeah. So as long as we keep our property rights in the group, the only time we have a liability, the liability that exists normally, like my credit card debt and all this stuff, is if I get a portion of that money out of the LLC for my own individual use, private, personal use. Okay. So as long as I keep the money there, I can move it around. I can buy a house, I can buy a car, I can invest it somewhere. I don't have to put it in my name. I can keep on using the benefits of the property. I can go have it acquire a car and I can drive the car around and not have the liability for it whatsoever. It's not considered a gain if I don't take title or I borrow the money, for example.
Personally, don't take title
Yeah.
personally.
So it's
Keeping
so
it in
easy.
the
It's
LLC.
so easy to avoid financial risk. I call it financial risk. Okay. So a tax liability is a financial risk. So is being sued. So for example, here's a big risk I have my clients avoid. It's not so much being sued. It's not so much tax liability. It's the cost of litigation. So imagine if your company gets sued and you have to defend it. And let's say you're completely right. And how much does that cost you? You know, $50,000, $100,000. It could cost a lot of money to win a case. And then what? Did you really win? Now you kind of lost, right? Maybe it's a write-off. I don't know. So if I can create a situation by divesting my exclusive rights over property into a group, and I use a limited liability to do that, the reason why I use an LLC is because it's recognized by the state, even if it's expired. The courts will recognize an expired LLC as valid.
Wow.
This is very, very powerful. Okay. There's a lot of other protections, but I can put a situation where, like for a business owner that might get sued by his customer, I can make it to where he can't even sue the core business. He has to sue a separate company. Or if he does sue, the business owner can literally ignore the lawsuit because it will never amount to an adverse financial consequence to him because of the way he's structured. So by changing
Wow.
my property rights, I can change the risk. Also, if I have a settled matter, as we get into this, and I want to talk about, if you don't want to ask me more, I want to get into the property issue with the mosquitoes and all this stuff.
Yes, we're gonna talk about the
Okay.
mosquitoes.
All right, go ahead.
Your mic is going in and out a little bit. I don't know if you want to bring it a little closer to your face. But I was going to ask, what about the private membership associations? Are those the
Okay.
same as an LLC?
So the thing I just described where let's say it's my brother and myself as owners of an LLC, my brother and myself are a private membership association. Nobody else can be in our group. That's it. Those two people are forever in human history and the future can never be in my brotherhood. Just me and my brother, right? That's all of us. So that is the definition of a private membership association. And so many of you I know are going out there and buying these documents that are PMAs. You don't need to do that. What I do for my clients is I identify a PMA that the client's already associated with, for example, his family. So again, what I'm doing is I'm taking a property right that would create a liability for the client, the person I'm working with, and I'm divesting his right to the property. I'm moving it into a group. The group is undefined. The group doesn't exist. Just like my brother and I don't exist legally. We don't have a joint liability to anybody unless we signed a joint tax return or unless we signed a commercial lease agreement. So the PMA is just that. It's an innocent party. It's a group that is clean and new. It doesn't have a liability unless you go off and create one. Did you hear me okay on that?
Yeah, yeah.
The
It's
PMA
going in
is
a
just
little bit,
another,
but we got it.
it's just the PMA guys don't get sold on don't be enamored by this fancy name. Okay. It's just a way, a PMA is a way to hold property rights to legally avoid all kinds of liability if you do it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and that is the key. It's getting it so it's not individualized. You're putting it out on something, another entity, a fictitious entity, which is what they created at our birth in the first place too, because they cannot deal with the living man or woman. So they did create the birth certificate, which I talked about in different videos. But go ahead, let's talk about the mosquitoes, you guys. So
Okay.
Tina Leah from Maui is rocking it on Maui. Kauai just barely we were able to put in a court to stop their decision so far for Kauai.
That's going
So
to be
talk to
temporary.
us about, yeah,
That's going to be, yeah, you
correct.
know that. So here's what I recommend. So give me the scenario. So they got these mosquitoes that are destroying possibly the bird population, right? The ecosystem in
Yes,
that
they
sense.
have.
Okay.
What they're claiming is they say that these birds they want to release these injected Wolbachia bacteria injected mosquitoes, and the male mosquitoes will not be compatible with the female mosquitoes. However, they're going to be accidentally releasing females mosquitoes with the male injected mosquitoes,
It's
and those
deliberate.
are very much compatible. And
Yeah.
they claim that this is so that they'll save the native birds. But here's the kicker on it all, because they save the native birds from avian malaria that they get from the mosquitoes. But the biggest thing that shows that that is not the reason for this experiment is they are not even going to, they don't have any protocol to show how this is actually affecting the birds. Is it actually helping? They have no protocol whatsoever for what they're claiming is the whole reason for the mosquitoes.
Okay.
So it's obviously something else.
Okay. So it comes down to land rights. So right now your land rights are abandoned. Nobody's paying attention. And what you just described is argumentative. It has to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like the petition for
Yes.
injunctive relief presents an argument to the court, and the counter is what they're saying. And so now it's not a settled matter. Everybody's arguing. And what's going to happen? They're going to let them do it anyways. So
Yes, correct.
what you have to do is take your what the conclusion is. The conclusion is don't let them do it, right? Don't let them allow this insect to have access to the land. What I would suggest that you do is write up an easement specifying how you're going to conserve and protect the land as it's stated in your petition for injunctive relief. This is what you're going to do anyways. So if I own some land in Hawaii or Kauai, and I want to be that one person, you're going to have to do this many times, thousands of times. You write up an easement agreement and you record it as the title holder. And now what you have is trespass when the mosquito comes onto the property. You have a claim that's based on a settled matter, and you don't have to argue, and you don't need expert witnesses anymore. You come in there for a simple trespass.
Wow.
It's that
That's a
simple.
very different way. That's a
You
very
cannot
different
argue.
way than what we're doing.
Now all this arguing about if it's good or bad, who cares? It doesn't matter. I could be totally insane out of my mind, but guess what? I have easement rights, and you just trespassed. And I would just take that
Okay,
easement
Tina
and
Lee, I hope you're watching this.
I would record it on go to everybody who wants to file a petition and sign the petition. Forget that.
Yeah.
Sign an easement and record it on your property, and then sue them for trespass because the matter's already settled. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking for people who own property then in Maui and Kauai where the mosquitoes are going to be released. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
And we could do this for so many other things, like all the fires in California and all this stuff. It's a settled matter. Easements.
All right. That is amazing. It's like right in our face. And that's actually way more simpler than going to court and arguing.
Yeah, they're gonna let you do it, so it looks like it's legitimate. It's a show, like you were saying
that's
the other
what they
day.
do.
It really is. So let's turn the TV
exactly
off.
what they're doing.
The parents come home and catch the kids at the keg party and say, "Okay, this party's over. Record the easement." Now you got an action. You got something that's actionable.
And there's no arguing about that.
That's right. It's just about, did you trespass or not? Yes, you did.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, I love it. I love that. So let's talk about property rights, because I know a lot of people have been asking me about, hey, when show about property taxes? And I was just watching one of your videos, and again, his website is Ace of Coins, and the link is in the description. But you were talking about property and taxes in the video that's on your homepage.
So lately I started looking at this stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, who has what lien rights on real estate generally? And I'm talking about residential homes. I live in the suburbs. That's why I look at that. And so the HOAs have lien rights. The HOA covenant is a lien. Now that's separate from what I'm going to talk about on easements regarding property taxes. So the HOA lien survives every foreclosure, even on its own claim. So for example, if you owe the HOA some fines or something and it wants to foreclose in your house, it can dispossess you of the house. It can take the title and this sort of thing, and then it can sell it and whatever. It can become the title holder temporarily. The HOA has a lot of power, but what's really interesting about this is the HOA has the least priority lien. It's behind the mortgage, the state property taxes. It's behind the city codes. It's under your mortgage, second mortgage. It's the last lien holder. It has the lowest priority. But guess what happens? It never goes away. it always gets the last word. So
Interesting.
if I control an HOA, which I've got some clients right now, we're defeating the IRS. These guys, it doesn't matter if they foreclose on the property because the HOA will simply take it back. So you have to control the
They'll-
HOA. So
Okay.
there's a little bit more
Wow.
involved with using an HOA in this manner. But here's why I brought it up. So when they started the fake pandemic, like in 2020, I said, look, guys, you're calling me on the phone, you're complaining about your kids are going to the school and they're doing this insane stuff, and you're still sending your children to school. So they're laughing at you. They're doing, and you're paying
I
for
know.
it. Yeah. So why
Thank
are
you.
you? But here's what they say. They go, well, I don't have a choice. I think, look, you always have a choice. So
You always have a
stop
choice.
paying for it. Stop paying your property taxes and send a letter to the property appraiser's office and your state attorney general's office and tell them I'm not funding this anymore. And so I know what they say. Everybody says, but John, they're going to take my house because I won't pay the property tax. And I say, yeah, they'll take the title, but be the last lien holder, be the easement right holder. So take some of the money, let's say 10% of what you would pay in the property tax, and set that aside for, road maintenance and things of that nature, emergency services, and put that into a trust fund and add that to the budget for your sheriff's office. You can do that yourself. You have to work with your neighbors on this stuff. So take your whole neighborhood that's under the HOA and do this for each neighborhood. Allocate money for the services you want and don't pay for the services you don't want because you're not getting those or hurting your family. All right. So let's say they foreclose on your property. Well, remember, if you control the HOA, the state's going to foreclose on your property, take the title, and then once all that's settled, you simply have the HOA do an impact fee and foreclose on the property and take it back, and then give it
And
whatever you
take
want
it
to do with it,
back.
and take it back.
Wow.
Take it back from the state or whatever investor bought it. Sorry, investor, but you saw that coming. You should have known better. But you can use the HOA for that purpose, and it does take cooperation with your neighbors. Unless you're the only
And
HOA.
it
I
takes
mean, yeah.
encourage.
It takes a little bit of
That's for
effort.
sure.
Okay, now an easier way to do it is with an easement. Now the easement, you are taking rights you have as the title holder and you're conveying them over to the possession of the property. And you're establishing these rights in a written instrument called an easement. It does not have to be recorded, although I recommend it be recorded, because once it's recorded, it's public record. It survives a foreclosure because it's not part of the title. It's immune from foreclosure.
Wow.
So if you have,
This is
let's say I have an
a
acre
friend of
of
mine's
land.
doing. Oh, go ahead.
Let's say I have an acre house, okay, and I don't like the property tax scheme. Yeah, I'm like fed up with it. Okay, look, my property tax is like in New Hampshire, doubled. All right, I'm done with that. I'm not going to pay anymore. So a couple of years go by, and the state's going to foreclose on my property. So they do. They sell my title. Some person buys it, or the state takes it over. I'm still there. Why? Because I have the legal right to be there under the easement rights. So there's a thing called the dominant estate, which is your title holder. You are the title holder if you're on the title, or your company's on the title. Let's say you're a trust, right? Using a trust or something. It doesn't matter. That's the dominant estate. The dominant estate conveys most of its rights. You can't do all of it. It can't be identical. You convey most of the rights to the easement holder, which is known as the servient estate. And I always use a corporation for this. You can use a trust, but I like using a limited liability company. So once
Mhm.
I convey the rights, okay, and let's say the title's taken, you would think I got to leave because, I'm trespassing. No, because now under the servient estate, I use a lease agreement and I'm leasing the property back from the servient estate, which had the same or similar rights as I did as the title holder. So now it's a civil matter. It's not trespass, and I can retain the use of the property. And yeah, I won't have the title for a while, but what's going to happen is I believe the title holder is going to just not be able to put good money after bad. And at some point, you'll be able to recover the title as an abandoned property, like a quiet title action without controversy.
Wow.
But in the meantime, it doesn't matter because you're not on the hook for property taxes. You never would be. And you're the easement holder, and it doesn't really matter.
Wow. So is this what you've done with your house and this is how you help other
I'm
clients?
doing this with, I have 91 acres up in Cedar Key, and I'm doing that with that land. So it's two parcels, and I'm doing it there. So, I'm developing that land. I'm not paying property tax on that. I'm not doing anything. Now, sometimes I'll get a permit because I got to build it up and do some things. I got to remove some trees and build some things. So for some safety reasons, I might get a permit, but sometimes I won't get a permit. Or if they make it too difficult for me, I won't bother. I don't need that. So I have the
That's the other
choice.
thing is always making,
Yeah,
yeah, these permits and everything like that. I'm like, why do people have to get a permit on their supposed own land? If they own the land,
because it's
why is it that we
abandoned.
have to get permission?
It's abandoned. You abandoned it. You're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're criticizing it. You got to stop abandoning the property rights. Claim your property rights and use it properly. Just like with the parents. I'll give an example. The fake pandemic situation, right? So this guy's father sends his child, 10, 12-year-old, to soccer league, right? And he signs this release and hold harmless agreement, which, you guys have seen this before if you send your children to these leagues, right? But at the
Mhm.
same time, they're telling him when you come to other practices and whatnot, you have to wear this face mask and all this nonsense. So I said, well, look, you've already indemnified them against any harm, any harm. You've already indemnified them. So they can't now require you to do something as if you're going to harm them. You've already indemnified them.
Wow. This is a really different way to look at things, you guys. So this is, and this is how I'm like speechless right now, because what it seems to me is, like you were saying, with the whole taxes and the IRS codes and all of it, which is total fraud. This is also fraud in the sense that this is a much simpler way to gain your property rights back and gain what is already yours, rightfully
I
yours.
wouldn't say it's fraud. Look, if I had the opportunity, if I were the governing system, if I were part of that, I would do exactly what they're doing. And I have to tell you, the IRS is perfect. The tax code is perfect. We just don't understand it. It's the best accounting system in human history. It's working for the United States, and I wouldn't want it to go
Yes.
away. If it went away, if we got rid of the IRS, we would have just another accounting firm do the same thing, Ernst and Young. I mean, here's the thing that people don't like about the IRS. You have to understand, the IRS has been given police powers.
Hmm.
You gave a bunch of accountants guns. That's what we
Yeah.
don't like about the IRS. You gave them the power to take your stuff without judicial oversight, or only judicial oversight
Yeah.
after the fact. And they narrowed your remedies in the courts very narrowly, so it's difficult to get a remedy. So what
But
I
there is
tell my
remedy.
there's a remedy. Yeah, don't have stuff. I noticed in the 90s, okay, so people would come to me and they'd say, hey, I did this trust. It was Massachusetts business, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, what is it? Is it a revocable trust or is it irrevocable? Who's the trustee and who's the beneficiary? And most of the time, it was the husband and wife who are both. And I said, that's not a trust. You don't have a trust. And the IRS had already named their trust as an alter ego of the people that weren't filing tax returns anymore, or whatever they were doing wrong, and took all their stuff. And they couldn't figure out why they were taking all their stuff. And I said, because it was still your stuff. You still had all the rights on it. You didn't show it. The IRS didn't agree with you. They just ignored your trust. And so what's your remedy? The trust would have to actually sue the government. Good luck with that one. You don't have a
Yeah.
remedy. So the IRS saw that and just stepped right over it. So what I thought is, okay, let's make it legitimately where my client does not have stuff. And I use a limited liability company for that. Never had a problem. Never, never, never. Even with a client that came to me, many, many clients came to me who were small business owners. They were in the middle of an IRS levy taken. They were doing a till take. All the receivables were being taken. They couldn't even pay their employees. They were off their savings, right? So I would simply set up a new bank account, a limited liability company, set up the ownership properly, reroute all the funds there, and it would turn off the IRS levy like in a week. Turn it off. Then the IRS is calling on the phone. They're so friendly. Hey, can you meet with us about a payment plan? No, we're too busy. Call back later. Send me a letter. you know, because all I did was change the property rights. And they saw it.
Yeah.
They could see everything. But they couldn't touch the new company. Why? It was an innocent party.
And
I
it
just
wasn't it
changed.
wasn't associated with them
It wasn't a taxpayer,
personally.
and even if the
Yeah.
company was a taxpayer, it wasn't a taxpayer in that situation. It was an innocent party. So that's what I do.
Wow.
So I use innocent parties. I change the property rights. Like for example, I have the new series called Divorcing the State. Biggest problem we have is like human trafficking with the family
Yeah.
courts, basically human trafficking, and abusing the family, and just destroying the family's ability to preserve wealth, just completely ruining the financial foundation of the family.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is get rid of the courts in the scope of the whatever is going on with the family. You shouldn't be able to go to the court and petition for divorce. Why is that? Well, because first of all, a marriage is already established. There's no adverse
Hmm.
parties. There's no justiciable controversy. It's not justiciable. It's not something the court can hear because it's husband and wife. And for example, if I have husband and wife that own an LLC, the court, the law looks at it as one person. But why is it different when I go file a divorce petition? There are no adverse parties in a marriage. There are no adverse property interests. So a person cannot sue himself, right? Moreover,
True.
a marriage involves agreements about how the children are taken care of, how the money's
Hmm.
allocated, right? These agreements are ignored So what happens is one spouse goes to the court for divorce, for example, or child custody, seeking to change the marital agreement. Courts are not designed for that. You can't go to the court to change an agreement, nor can you go to the court to impose new agreements written by the judge, which is essentially what they're doing.
True.
Moreover, you can't get someone to sign a dissolution of marriage agreement, which is what they do, under
Mm-hmm.
penalty of contempt. That's duress. And there's
Wow.
duress when there's a tort. The tort is intruding upon a fiduciary obligation of the parents with no accountability. The judge has no liability. You figured out how to allocate your money to care for your family, and some judge comes in there not knowing what wisdom you use to do that and says, no, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to do it this way. And that ruins everything. And now you're trying to, everybody that's gone through that pretty much suffers credit problems, debt
Yeah.
problems, financial hardship, but the court doesn't care. And so this is a tort. Family court is a tort.
And they
So
also
it's
take the children.
that's what they want to do. Any
Yeah.
opportunity they can do, they can. Yeah. So my point in mentioning that is that it's all about property rights. You have to understand what are your property rights. Like for example, what I choose to like how when I choose to get my child for his birthday or when I choose to get him new clothing, right? That is my choice. That is a property right. It's a fundamental right, and no one has that duty but me. I volunteered for that when I became a father and a husband, and no, I can't even give that away to somebody unless I died. Then someone would maybe substitute for me. But naturally, no one could come in and tell me what to do. Just like I couldn't go in the judge's house at night after work. I couldn't walk in his house, open his
Yeah.
refrigerator, pop a beer, sit next to him, grab the remote control, and start watching TV or tell him what to wear. Who am I? And who is he? Right?
Exactly.
So, but
Exactly.
you have to know what your property rights are, and you have to be able to articulate them.
And that's what you help people do.
This is what I do. I give people the
Yeah.
words. I give him the words. Like this one gentleman. Okay, so he had this thing. It was clearly a mistake by the IRS. The IRS said you owe $150,000. We're going to destroy your life. I'm just being dramatic, but all these letters they send you are so
Yeah.
terrifying. And so he sends me all these letters, and I said, okay, well, this is an obvious mistake. Let's just send a letter. So the trick is, who do we send the letter to? Who are we talking to at the IRS? Because you can't talk to the front end person. They're designed to where they can't fix
Yeah.
your situation. Yeah.
And they
So
don't
we
even understand it in the
no,
first
they
place.
don't. Oh my God, don't get me started
Mm.
on that one. Please. So we sent it to the correct office. I guess it was because it fixed the problem. But the thing is, it took 8 months. Every couple of months, the IRS has sent a letter saying, okay, we're still working on it. We're still working on it. We're still like 4 letters. Finally, like just about 3 weeks ago, he sends me an email saying, hey, finally, they said I'm right. I don't owe the $150,000. And we just sent one letter, you know. And
And
it's
so
just,
what was in the letter? What did it say?
well, all I did was tell them the truth. I just said, look, here are the facts in the situation, and here's where you made a mistake. It was a clerical error they made. It wasn't about their tax issue. It wasn't tax issue.
Oh,
Yeah. Now, if you
oh,
guys
I
want to
see.
hear if you want to hear something about the tax issue, I'll just tell you real quick. So people get 1099s from Coinbase, right? And a lot of you don't even know this. They're erroneous. But if you give them to your accountant, he doesn't care. He's going to throw it on your 1040 and you got yourself a
Yeah.
stupid tax liability, which is erroneous. So what I do is I take the 1099 and we exclude it from your 1040. Ooh, that's scary for people, right? But we also send a letter into the IRS. Now, here's how you talk to the IRS. You have to use a process that they have established, they recognize. So in order for you to send a letter and ask them for a legal conclusion, use a form letter that the IRS publishes in its bulletins. And it's a 6-page letter. You have to give them all this gobbledygook, but they give you a little spot in there where you can make a legal statement, a conclusion. And you ask them to agree with you or disagree with you. So on the 1099, when we exclude it, I ask the IRS to agree that that was proper. And I give them the legal argument, which I can explain to you if you want, on the cryptos. And every single time I've done it, which is a couple of dozen, I don't do it anymore because I don't have to. They already know. I don't need to even ask them anymore. I have so many letter determinations from the IRS saying that I don't have to include an erroneous 1099. And in fact, it was erroneous because it made the wrong conclusion about cost basis. All of them are. All that software that Coinbase is using, don't use it, guys. It's wrong.
Wow.
IRS
So
agrees many, many times.
so when you said that they make the wrong conclusion, what was the wrong conclusion? Was
Okay, so if I'm trading between Bitcoin and Litecoin, and I'm some smart guy, and I start with $1,000 and I keep doing this for a year, and my $1,000 is now worth 2,300 or 23,000 because I'm really smart, right? I figure out So I have a, let's call it a gain. And that's where it ends. That's not taxable.
It's not okay. This I know this is it's like, how is it not taxable? Even though
There
I don't
is
think
a there is
anything
an
should be taxable when
appreciation
you
in
have your own
value.
income.
It's an appreciation in value. It is not yet a gain. If I dispossess my
Oh,
ownership of the property, cryptos is property. If I dispossess my ownership by selling it for dollars, guess what's being taxed, guys? It's not cryptos. If cryptos are being taxed, you could pay the tax in cryptos. Remember this. What's being taxed is dollars because you can only pay the tax in
dollars.
dollars. Did I
That's
cite a
right.
law? Yeah, think about this. I didn't have to cite a law. I'm not even making a legal argument. It's so simple. El Salvador defined Bitcoin as legal tender. Okay, guess what? Bitcoin is taxable in El Salvador only.
Oh wow. Oh.
There's a great
Oh my
example.
gosh.
It
I
ain't
get it now.
here. So
Yeah.
be careful. The only thing that's being taxed is dollars. If you don't have
Dollars. Yeah.
dollars, because Litecoin and Bitcoin, right? Remember my example? I'm trading them back and forth, or all these other coins, right? Whatever. It doesn't matter what platform. I make all this money because I'm smart. Okay. I keep trading in coins, right? Where are the dollars? They're not there. Am I
They're not there.
required to sell my property to get dollars? No. Am I required to go find some dollars to pay a tax? No, I'm not. I don't have a tax. Now, this all goes away if I think I do. This back to what I was telling you before. If I think I have a tax liability because my stupid accountant said I did, and I
Hmm.
include that 1099 on my 1040, well, then I deserve everything I have to pay because I'm
Then you have to pay
stupid.
for it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm
And you've
stupid and I
included
paid a
it.
tax. Right. And this is known as, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, if you do it like this, it is correct. But if you don't do it, it is also correct. It's your choice. If you want to use accrual-based accounting, you're going to pay way more taxes. And as an individual investor with a net worth of under, let's say, $5 million, you should not be using accrual-based accounting. What we're going to be using, we should be using is cash basis accounting, but no one talks about that. Cash basis means when I dispose of a property and I had a net gain in dollars, that is subject to reporting and taxation
Hmm.
on my 1040. If I do that in my name, now if I go back to my example on the LLC, if I'm using an LLC, all that goes away. All that drama goes away. I don't care how many 1099s I get. I can ignore them because my LLC is a tax deferred entity because of the way I'm
Yeah.
using it. My LLC does not file a tax return. Does not. Because that is the tax treatment I've chosen. Why? Because that is the tax treatment I've chosen. I have the right to
And
do
everything
that.
is choice.
It
I
really
love
is.
it.
Now, if it files a
Mm-hmm.
tax return, okay, fine, no problem. You could do that too. You could become an S
Mm-hmm.
corp. You could file a 1065. You can file it as a partnership. You can claim it on Schedule C, but you don't have to.
You guys hearing all this? Well, if you have any questions about it, asking John here, Ace of Coins. John, is there any last things that you want to share with people? And I love that you said everything is it's choice because it really, really is. And people, we have been programmed to think that we have to do things and we have to do it this certain way. And I've been telling people, no, that's not true. And there is more, we are more free than the government likes to
Sure.
put fear into us and show and have us thinking that that we're not when we truly are.
Well,
But is there any last things that you
remember that
oh,
we are the government. We've
yes.
commissioned certain people to carry out the mundane functions of government, but ultimately we're responsible. And if we abandon our property, we deserve what we get. So wake up each day and think to yourself, what kind of property rights do I have? And let me give you another phrase you can understand. You can look this up. Intangible private property rights. That's mostly what we're dealing with. That has to do with the fake
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. That has to do with, people trying to tell you have to do a certain thing. You know, Property rights are so important. And it's the property right that is causing the liabilities that we all complain about and that we all spend a lot of money to hire lawyers to fix for us. And the lawyers are glad to do it because they're not practicing law, they're practicing attornment. You have to understand who you're dealing with. The practice of attornment means I'm going to take property from one and give to another in a system of
Mm.
fealty. I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
subject, but understand what your rights are and when you have them and take steps to protect them and claim them. I don't know how
Stand
else
up
to
for them.
say it, but
And that's the
yeah.
other thing with the lawyers is that's a whole different topic because they actually have an oath to the bar, which isn't even which is part of the English court system.
Just know that
But
they're
that's
practicing attornment. Lawyers are
Mhm.
practicing. I use them for things, but don't ever go to a lawyer and say, please help me. I don't know what to do. Then you're screwed. Go to a
Yeah.
lawyer and tell him what you want him to do for you. That's how you use an attorney, because they're good for reference. I mean, the attorneys have resources. They have bonds and things like that. You can use them. In fact, I like to use them to get my mail. I like to use lawyers
What?
for handling my mail. Yeah, I get the attorney-client privilege. They're good for something.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a very interesting way to do it. Well, you are just full of simple remedies that people don't even understand, and including myself, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to study your site because I'm listening to this going, what are you? And some of the remedies sounds really not that hard. It's like a
Many times.
simple methods
Many
that are
times.
right
Yes.
kind of in front of our face, and
Hmm.
which we can't see sometimes.
Well, I would invite you to join my Telegram group, Ace of Coins. I mean, we talk about this stuff. There's a discussion forum and an announcement forum. And then I have a Thursday evening call and I talk about all these things like, okay, so if you guys are concerned about FinCEN, the new reporting, you see this one? You see this one yet, Michelle? The
No, I haven't
financial
seen it.
crime, the Financial Crimes Network is trying to scare everybody, and the lawyers are trying to scare everybody about the new reporting for companies that organize LLCs or trusts or whatever. And so tonight at 10 o'clock, I'm going to talk about this, and it's a joke. It's a total joke. Everybody's afraid for nothing. You know,
As that is actually what we usually are,
yeah,
afraid for nothing.
I'll just tell you the punchline here, because FinCEN says you have to do this disclosure, and the tax code protects people against that exact disclosure. You have privacy rights in the tax code. They're very good. They're very powerful. They protect you from every other government agency under
Wow.
6103. If you guys want to look it up, 26 USC 6103. You will not believe it if you've never read 6103. Check it out and then go look at the FinCEN regs and you'll see, what the heck? How can FinCEN do it? Oh, they get you to think you have to, and then you waive your rights under
Yes.
6103. And so
Exactly.
what I tell FinCEN is, hey, look, if you want that information, you have to go to the Secretary of the Treasury. That's protected, thanks to the tax code.
Oh, that's yes, and I love that's awesome because the fear is always is if you can keep people in fear, that's when you can control them the best.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing. I
Yes.
love it, John.
Well,
Thank you
thank you,
so much for your
Michelle.
time, and you guys, aceofcoins.com, and your Telegram is Ace of Coins as well, you said?
Yeah, Ace of Coins, right? Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, I always do a guided visualization and prayer. So just join me for that quickly. And thank you so much for your time. I think this information is so helpful because this is a time for, I feel that the light of truth is really showing up, and it's each one of our responsibility to understand that we have choices all of the time. Everything is choice. I was talking to this one friend of mine and he's like, oh, I can't do that because that's impossible. I said, no, it's not impossible. That there's a choice. You have a choice. So let's do a quick visualization. Infinite intelligence of all things, you are moving the sun across the sky. You are running the tides in the ocean. You are beating our hearts and you are breathing our bodies. And we know that this amazing time that we all said, yes, I will come to earth at this time in history, is the time of awakening, is the time of truth, of shining light on darkness, of shining light on fear, to show that there's really nothing to fear, that everything is choice. And we are so grateful for people like John, and we're sending Ace of Coins so much appreciation and gratitude for the truth that him and his company is showing to the people around the world, that there is nothing to fear, that everything is choice, and that remedy can be a lot simpler than we think and then we have been guided and programmed to believe. So Great Spirit, we just know that there is a frequency of unity in humanity, of love, of peace, and of harmony, that all people around the world are free, that we are sovereign, and that we are always kept safe, and that people matter. And we send this frequency out to the entire planet, that it touches all people, giving hope to those who feel alone right now and are in fear, filling them up with a lighter frequency of love and of compassion and of total understanding that they are not alone, that we are in this together, and that we are guided on this journey, knowing that each one of us has the inner strength to get through this time in abundance, in unity, and in harmony with each other, our family, friends, and with the world. And we know that this world is becoming a much, much better place. And we know it is done. And so it is.
All right. Thank
John,
you, Michelle.
thank you so much. Much
My
mahalo
pleasure.
for your time. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
be studying your site so I can understand what you just talked about.
We'll talk soon. I'm
And
sure
for
we'll
those
talk
of
some
you,
more.
yes, check out his site, Ace of Coins. It's in the description. Much mahalo and aloha, everyone.
Bye-bye.